Brewmaster Monks are undergoing massive changes in patch 11.0, the War Within Prepatch. It feels like a brand new class, and I couldn't be happier about that. There's definitely going to be a period of adjustment, but I think that Monks are one of the top 2 tanks in the game heading into the next expansion, so the adjustment will be worth it. Hi, it's Llarold, and today I'm going to talk about how to play Brewmaster Monk in patch 11.0. The War Within is right around the corner, it's time to get hyped, but first, don't forget to like and subscribe. The majority of the changes Brewmaster Monk has received have come in the form of changes in the talent tree, and I'll talk about those in a second. These are very good changes and quite substantial, so I'll give them a bit more detail in a bit, but here's the general overview of what's happening with Monk. Several offensive cooldowns have been removed entirely. Monk has had significantly more mobility, group utility, and even the ability to remove enrage buffs added to it. You can also once again afford speed taunt, that's finally back. A lot of bad talents have been removed and a lot of others have been buffed. Some have been changed from 2-pointers into 1-pointers. Brew generation is way up, Rushing Jadewind is probably not worth using anymore. Rotational friction is way down, stagger values on big hits are way up, and passive defenses are just a lot stronger. Now, tier sets have supposedly been disabled. This is always a little inconsistent, but they're supposed to be disabled during the pre-patch, and this isn't really a huge problem for Monks. The tier wasn't really all that build enabling, so I think we'll be just fine. Okay, very shortly after I finished working on this, Blizzard dropped a big fat stack of nerfs to all tanks, and Brewmaster Monks are among them. I did say all. This is the most recent part of the video. I've recorded it after everything else that's in the video. Editing, the invisible art. I am holding up today's newspaper, but I'm off camera, so anyway, I haven't changed anything else in the video. I don't think anything else needs changing, but that is my little disclaimer. If any of the numbers don't add up because, they made a little change here or there, and now it looks different, blame Blizzard. Maybe they'll nerf stuff again. I mean, of course they will nerf stuff again at some point. Whatever. Ultimately, I think Monks have come out of all of these nerfs as the best of all tanks, which, yay. But also, I think the only impact that this has really had in terms of stuff that you do, stuff that I've talked about in this guide, is that it shreds the value of both Dance of the Wind and Llarold's Grace. And just to show that off in the talent calculator, that is these 2 talents right here. This one, the choice node with Dampen Harm and Dance of the Wind, and this one, the choice node with Diffuse Magic and Llarold's Grace. I don't think you take either of the passives ever now. I think you take the active skills in both cases. And honestly, I don't think this is the worst thing in the world. Brewmaster has lost a lot of offensive cooldowns. It's lost a lot of necessary mandatory keybinds. And so then adding in Diffuse Magic, and then kind of did play with Dampen Magic or Dampen Harm a lot anyway, but whatever. The point is, adding in 2 defensive cooldowns after having removed 3 offensive cooldowns, I think it's okay. I think it's totally manageable, and ultimately, the class is still in pretty great shape. Regular and magic stagger values are also up quite a bit. If we look at this right here, regular stagger and magic stagger, both of those are up, so purifying becomes more important than ever, but none of the other changes really impact the way that you play or how you spec. Now let's move on to talents, and I have some pulled up right here, and there are a lot of changes to cover in some detail, so let's just kind of get through it. First off, Soothing Mist, no longer required for anything important. That's great. Super happy about that. Tiger's Lust is available very easily. Roll, I guess I didn't mention this, Roll now by default just gives you 2 charges of Roll instead of having to spec into getting the second charge of Roll, so that's good. There's also this talent, Bounding Agility. Your Roll and Chi Torpedo will take you a little bit further, and you can tell, yeah, it's a couple extra yards. There's also just, there's this talent here, Jade Walk, that I'm not currently spec'd into, but I do really like. You could justify taking this pretty easily. 15% move speed while you're out of combat. This is one of, 8 talents or something that gives you more mobility. This is probably the least impactful one, but it's pretty cool. I've mentioned this elsewhere, but Vivacious Vivification, this talent right here, which used to suck, now is actually pretty good. It makes it the same as it always did. Every 10 seconds, your next Vivify will be instant, and it also gives 20% more healing, but as you can see from the energy cost, instead of costing a full 30, when Vivacious Vivification is up, it will only cost 8 energy. So all right, here we are, 100 energy. It should have just popped up. Boom, only cost 8, so less than you are even able to regen in that 1 GCD. Pretty great. This means you can kind of use this to spot heal yourself, or maybe spot heal people in a group. I wouldn't say it's huge. It's certainly not as much on-demand healing as a prop pally has historically been capable of providing, but it is pretty useful, and I think it's worth the point now, considering you have a lot more points to go around. There's a lot of stuff in the tree that makes it so that you have more availability on your crowd control skills, things like Ancient Arts removing or reducing the cooldown of paralysis and leg sweep, talents like this right here, energy transfer, reducing the cooldown of paralysis and roll whenever you successfully interrupt. This can actually add up to a lot more availability of just being able to use paralysis, and paralysis, if you spec into pressure points, will remove enrage effects, which is pretty cool. I like that a lot. There's also this talent, Peace and Prosperity, which reduces the cooldown of Ring of Peace. I like that as well. You still have the usual Dampen Harm, Dance of Wind, Yulon's Grace, Diffuse Magic, that sort of set of choices there as you have had before. You also have Vigorous Expulsion and Strength of Spirit, so you still have the same things that buff your Expel Harm, but one thing that has really changed that's pretty interesting is Chi Wave. As you can see, Chi Wave is now just a passive proc. When you Rising Sun Kick or Vivify, you will just passively release some extra damage that jumps back and forth between enemies and allies. It's pretty cool. It just basically casts Chi Wave for free. Now, Chi Burst is a little bit different. What's interesting about Chi Burst is that for Windwalker, and I assume Mistweaver, I don't know, I haven't played Mistweaver since I last did the Mage Tower, but for Windwalker at least, Chi Burst now becomes this weird active skill that you have to trigger the ability to use through just random procs. That's not how it works for Brewmaster. As Brewmaster, it's just the same old Chi Burst. It's a skill, you press a button, it goes on cooldown, the end. As you can see, Chi Burst does a lot of damage, especially compared to Chi Wave, but Chi Wave is super easy to use and Chi Burst is not, so I think I'll still be sticking with Chi Wave. Improved Touch of Death has been moved up in the tree, and as you can see down here, Fatal Touch now makes it so that you get a damage bonus when you use Touch of Death. This is a pretty substantial increase in quality from the old Improved Touch of Death, where it just gave you some cooldown reduction. Actually getting a damage bonus after using it is really good. Kind of incentivizes using it as soon as it's available, rather than waiting until you're actually able to like kill something all the way from full to dead with the full Touch of Death hit. You'll also notice that Summon White Tiger statue is just completely gone. Summon Black Ox statue is the option that's available for Brewmaster Monk. It's now only available for Brewmaster Monk. And as you can see, the bottom of the tree is like completely redesigned. There's some pretty interesting stuff down here. There's some stuff that's not so great, or maybe more for PvP, like Swift Art, but you have some pretty cool little nodes here in Chi Proficiency and Martial Instincts that give you just some very small but good passive bonuses, you know, more damage, more avoidance, or more damage and more healing done. Noticeably, the old auras that would give you healing increase, avoidance for the whole group, those are gone. I kind of think that's for the best, even though it is a reduction in group utility for Monk. Technically, it wasn't anything that anybody really ever cared about. Certainly, you weren't building groups around that, so better for it to just kind of be baked into your own personal value, I think. Windwalking has been buffed. It's a lot easier to get. It is 4% move speed for the group. Don't really think it's all that great, but it is an option as well. And now I want to take a look at all 5 of these capstone talents here. Lighter Than Air is probably the most interesting one. When you roll, you become lighter than air, and you're able to double jump, and that'll dash you forward very quickly. It does increase your cooldown of roll by 2 seconds, but that's fine. You can spec into Celerity and get down to a 15-second roll charge cooldown anyway, recharge cooldown anyway. So check this out. Roll, double jump. Yeah, pretty neat. Not a huge amount of distance covered by that leap, obviously. You only have 5 seconds to do it, but not bad. Like, I certainly can't jump all that way without that double jump, so cool, could be useful for kind of getting over obstacles, pushing through things that you want to pass through, Razageth lines, for example. The next talent here is Flow of Chi. It just gives you a bonus based on what your health pool is at. If you're above 90%, you get a move speed bonus. If you're below 35%, you get a healing bonus, and then if you're in between 90 and 35, you get damage reduction. It's a little weird to me that falling below 35% health turns off damage reduction, like when you would want it most. But I think the idea here is that when you're at very low health, you get this healing taken increase bonus. You can slap yourself with an instant Vivify or an Expel Harm, zip back up into that damage reduction zone, and be okay. In the final talent here, this sort of middle capstone talent, I should say, you have the option of Escape from Reality. Pretty useful in some situations. Razageth comes to mind again. PvP, obviously very good. or Transcendence Linked Spirits, and this is the ability, basically they're stealing from Wernstone, where instead of setting your Transcendence on the ground, you can tie your Transcendence to another player, and then you can transcend to them. Super cool idea. Definitely there's going to be some use for this in raid fights and Mythic Plus. Oh my god, the PvP implications, it's going to be crazy. I've already talked about Fatal Touch, just a nice little damage bonus for using Touch of Death. That's pretty cool. I did gloss over Bounce Back, getting a pretty nice buff. You only have to get hit for 12% of your max health in order for Bounce Back to work. It's 20% damage reduction for 4 seconds, and it is a 1-pointer. That's pretty good. And then finally, you have two options here. You have Rushing Reflexes or Clash. Clash is now a class-wide talent, and I'll just show off Rushing Reflexes instead of Windwalking. Why not? I will roll toward an enemy to show it off. So the way Rushing Reflexes works is if you roll right near to an enemy, instead of like then having to kind of take a couple more steps to get into range of them, it'll just snap you right into melee with them. If I can do it correctly. There we go. Finally, I finally got it to work. It took me a little while, but anyways, yeah, there's definitely going to be a cut in there of me getting that to work, but as you can see, it's a little snap into melee range against enemies. Not anything super huge. I think Clash is definitely like more useful, but you know, it's something. All right, now let's take a look at the Brewmaster tree, and that has gotten some pretty substantial changes as well. The top 3 rows are all the same. You'll notice that instead of Healing Elixir, that's gone completely. You now have Elixir of Determination, and it is a passive sort of healing bonus. Basically, when you fall below 40%, you get an absorb for 50% of your last Purify, or a minimum of 20% of your max health. So at the bare minimum, it's a 20% of your max health shield whenever you fall below 40% health. That's pretty great, and it only has a 15-second cooldown, so that's really, really good. Now over on the right side, Special Delivery and Rushing Jadewind, they're the same as they ever were, but I think Rushing Jadewind has probably lost its fastball. I think it's probably not worth using anymore, both because Brew charge generation is up quite a bit, and so Special Delivery just becomes a lot stronger just on the back of that alone, but also because I blank on the name of the talent, even though I literally just looked it up. Resonant Fists, the old talent that made it so that you just randomly would get extra damage procs whenever you would deal damage, so you had a justification to tick as many times as possible with RJW. Resonant Fist is gone. That kind of was what made Rushing Jadewind as good as it was, and that's it now. So Celestial Brew is still the same old Celestial Brew. It does have the improved Celestial Brew talent baked into it, so you're not having to spend a point on that. August Blessing here. This talent is a new one when you would be healed above maximum health. So when you would be overhealed, you will instead convert an amount equal to 40% of your crit chance into a heal over time effect. So this is a bit of a weirdly phrased talent. Basically, you convert a decent chunk of all overhealing into a hot. That's really all it boils down to. This is pretty good. This makes it, it's very easy to overheal a Brewmaster Monk due to Celestial Fortune, and this just makes it so that you kind of have a nice heal over time effect rolling pretty much all the time. It really does make it easier to stay alive. Kind of the healing equivalent of Stagger. Pretty good. One with the Wind is a talent that, it has some bugs with it, but just the idea that when you dodge, you will sometimes not reset your mastery. You'll be able to get another guaranteed dodge afterwards. That's pretty cool. There can be some issues with swings syncing up, but it's okay. I think more importantly, Zen Meditation is no longer required for pathing. I think that's really good. It also has had its cooldown reduced to 2.5 minutes, so you can justify taking that instead of One with the Wind, since there are some bugs with One with the Wind. Strike at Dawn is a talent I really like. It is basically just a component of the Aberrus Mastery, where Rising Sun Kick grants a stack of Elusive Brawler. It's pretty simple. It just adds defensive value onto using Rising Sun Kick, which is good. That should have always been there, and I do like that. It really makes it so you dodge a lot more attacks. The combination of these two talents together really makes it so that you dodge a crazy amount of attacks against raid bosses and also in Mythic Plus. A lot of these talents through the middle of the tree are still pretty much the same as they have been, but you'll note that we're no longer being compelled to take Invoke Nizao in order to path down the tree, and that's really, really good. Also, you are able to take Stormstout's Last Keg and a lot of these talents down in the bottom section of the tree, like for raid, I would take this, I would take Facepalm and Stormstout's Last Keg and Blackout Combo, and I would be using Blackout Combo and Tiger Palm to do the majority of my damage in raids. In Mythic Plus, you're probably not going to be making nearly as much use of that, so you could justify maybe taking this new talent Ox Stance. It makes it so that whenever you cast Purify, you get a stack of Ox Stance. It stacks up to 10 times. And when you take hits that are larger than 60% of your health, that's pre-stagger value, it will consume a charge to massively increase the amount of staggered damage. There are some talents underneath it, like it'll trigger whenever the hit is 40% of your health, again, pre-stagger. That's okay. Black Ox Adept making it so that it triggers whenever you Rising Sun Kick. You know, you're way overcapped. You don't really get hit by that many hits that are 60 or even 40% of your health all the time. I like the idea here. I think it's a little bit misguided. Putting it this deep in the tree and having it be a 3-point talent, it just sort of seems like something that can be useful in raid, maybe in some Mythic Plus situations, but I honestly think you could never take Ox Stance or anything associated with it and probably be fine. Some of these other talents, like High Tolerance, is just really consistently good, and I mean, Facepalm will add a lot of damage, so that's pretty cool. Also, Anvil and Stave has been reworked, and that's, I think, what we'll close on here. Anvil and Stave has been reworked. Instead of having an internal cooldown on it, it just makes it so that when you dodge or an enemy misses you, which again, that has synergy with Strike at Dawn and One with the Wind, increasing your dodge chance overall by a lot, it will reduce the cooldown on your brews. It's half a second per point, and then instead of there being any sort of internal cooldown or, you know, super long internal cooldown, like 3 seconds or something, the effect has just got, what is it? I think logarithmic scaling or something. Basically, it gets reduced based on how many enemies are hitting you at a time. So this really adds a ton of extra brew charges whenever you're tanking anything that is AoE or really anything like that. So I think this is what I would use for my Mythic Plus talent setup. Something along these lines I think is pretty good. Maybe you could justify dropping, you know, if you wanted to drop one with the Wind for Zen Meditation, I wouldn't. Some people maybe wouldn't care as much about August Blessing. They would go, you know, just go for Facepalm instead of the healing over time rolling, or, you know, even potentially High Tolerance. There's definitely a bit of room to wiggle around at the bottom of the tree. All right, now let's talk about Brewmaster Monks rotation. Heg Smash, Rising Sun Kick, Blackout Kick, and Breath of Fire are the 4 main rotational skills, and you want to try to maximize your usage of them at all times. The key here is the Blackout Kick is the highest priority skill most of the time, and you always want to keep at least 1 charge of Keg Smash on cooldown. That's pretty easy though, and after that, you use Blackout Kick ahead of Rising Sun Kick and Breath of Fire. This might seem a little counterintuitive in single target since Rising Sun Kick deals more damage than Blackout Kick, but if you always prioritize Blackout Kick, whenever you have multiple good skills available, you'll have fewer points in your rotation where none of those good skills are available and you're forced to hit Tiger Palm or Sprinting Crane Kick. The rotation and cooldowns are complex, but the main rule is just to not let your cooldown abilities sit on cooldown for long. If you want to optimize your damage while using Charred Passions, be sure that you always maintain that buff before hitting Blackout Kick, even if that means suspending your Blackout Kick cast by a global to use Breath of Fire first. As for when to use Tiger Palm versus Spinning Crane Kick, it's really just a matter of whether you're in AoE or single target. In single target, you use Tiger Palm as the filler skill of choice, and in AoE, it's Spinning Crane Kick. Now, there is one little bit of a wrinkle here, and that's in raid situations where you're trying to maximize your damage and you're using Facepalm. In that case, Blackout Kick Tiger Palm is the strongest 2-button combo, and what you want to do is build the rest of your rotation around kind of weaving in 2 globals at a time in between those Blackout Kick Tiger Palms from basically the start of the fight all the way until the finish. Alright, in the interest of keeping this short, I will say that cooldowns for Monk are fairly straightforward and definitely a lot less complicated than they were thanks to the removal of being White Tiger statue, Bone Dust Brew, and I guess really Invoke Nizhao is pretty much dead as well, so that has definitely simplified things. Touch of Death deals a lot of damage all at once. It's fairly intuitive. The only annoying part of it is that the game can take a second to register that it is usable on a target once they've fallen to a health value that is less than yours. Weapons of Order is a very long buff / debuff, and my one little trick to using it is just to make sure that you get your stacks up as quickly as you can once it's active, and then try to extend them right before the buff falls off so that you're getting the maximum possible coverage. I will sometimes even break a Tiger Palm, like Blackout Kick Tiger Palm, combo in raid just to get another Keg Smash in and extend that Weapons of Order buff from, like 2 seconds out to 8 with the last GCD, I'm willing to do that. I think it is probably worth it. It's kind of on the edge there for breaking that specific combo, but in general, trying to extend that combo is really important. Exploding Keg deals a ton of burst damage, and then gives you a little extra hit of damage for each time you hit during the 3 seconds that the debuff is active. So in AoE, you should slap Spinning Crane Kick twice after you've cast Exploding Keg. In single target, that's not really necessary. You just throw it down and then continue your rotation as normal. If you're using Rushing Jade Wind, you can. Then you would refresh that before casting Exploding Keg, so it'll do a bunch of ticks throughout the process. Otherwise, don't worry about it. As for defensive cooldowns, they're super straightforward as well. Fortifying Brew and Dampen Harm both reduce your damage taken. Diffuse Magic, if you're using it, is a really good cooldown that only applies to magic damage. It can also dispel debuffs that are on you and throw them back onto enemies, so that's cool as well. Use them to mitigate damage. Pretty straightforward, right? Try not to overlap them. I would say that's maybe the biggest tip I have, is try not to overlap your defensive cooldowns. The same goes with Celestial Brew. It's a big ol' shield. Use it to shield yourself. And kind of try not to overlap your cooldowns. You really want to space them out so that you maximize all of their values. You get a lot of diminishing returns when you're popping defensive cooldowns at the same time, whereas you get increasing returns when you pop offensive cooldowns at the same time. Now let's talk about how to pull on a Brewmaster Monk. You want to use Keg Smash as soon as you're in range of enemies, and then follow up with Breath of Fire. If you hit the entire pack with a Keg Smash and Breath of Fire, you can go into your normal rotation from there. Blackout Kick, Spinning Crane Kick, Rising Sun Kick, all the usual stuff. If you miss anything, or you have any mobs that are straggling, I usually just in the first couple of seconds of a pull, I like to tag everything with a Spinning Crane Kick, especially if I'm using Charred Passions and I've just cast Breath of Fire. I really like to hit that Spinning Crane Kick. It'll hit for a lot. Make sure that I've gotten everything tagged, I've got threat on them, and then proceed into the normal rotation from there. In terms of stats, agility is number 1. Always shoot for increasing your item level. When comparing similar item level pieces of gear, or thinking about enchants and gems and stuff, versatility and crit are your 2 best stats. Mastery is pretty decent, and haste is, unfortunately, still pretty bad. Monk is a pretty great tank right now. It's strong, it's fun, and I think it's in a much better state heading into the next expansion than it has been throughout all of Dragonflight. I'm very excited about it, and you should be too. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.